Hey, what's up? I'm back. How are you? Welcome to another video that I call Crime Dive, because everything has to have a title, right? My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, like at all, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So, yeah, that's what I talk about. If you like true crime and you want to feel better about your makeup skills, because I seriously never know what I'm doing, you should absolutely like, subscribe, and let's hang out together every Tuesday where I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. Happy to be back. I am so sorry I had to miss last week, guys. The day we got back from a road trip, I was just super stuffed up, through my nose and my ears wouldn't pop. That's why I thought it was like a sinus cold. And then a day later, Jeff got sick. And then a day after that, his brother got sick. So yeah, after that, we were like, oh no, did we get COVID? And so we got the at-home tests, and lo and behold, we did. Thankfully, I only had it for about 3 days, and it really just stuck to my nose. That's why I thought it was a sinus cold at first, because when we went on our road trip, my allergies were just haywire. But yeah, it turned out to be COVID, and thankfully, so glad I'm vaxxed and boosted. I can only imagine how it would have been if I hadn't been. But yeah, I'm back now, ready to record some videos. Like I said in my channel update, I was scheduled to take the 5th Tuesday of August off. But since I had to cancel on ya, I'm gonna go ahead and post 5 videos for August. So yeah, we'll get all caught up. And you can probably still kind of hear it a little bit in my voice. Still have very trace elements in my sinuses still. So you could probably hear it in my voice. I don't know. But yeah, I think I'm on day 7 of my quarantine. So yeah, I think I read that it was 5 days, but it said that you could still be transmissible within 6 or 10 days after you got it. So I'm just gonna do the original 2-week quarantine just to be safe, you know? Alrighty, enough of that. Let's talk about today's case. Now, I was originally scheduled to talk about the 2-parter case that I have for you guys, and it is a whopper, alright? It's gonna be super long. However, I didn't really want to do a 2-parter, breaking up months. This is the last video for the month of July. So I think I'm going to do the 2-parter video starting next Tuesday, will be our first video of August, and we will do the 2-parter then. So I switched some things around, and today's case, very interesting, very sad, of course, because it is true crime. These are sad stuff that we're talking about. These are human beings that this stuff has happened to, right? So it is sad, but at the same time, just sort of mind-boggling. Today, we are talking about a woman known as Alma Theede, all right? She's also known as Vance Avenue Alma. Now, at first, when you dive into Alma's story, you're like, oh my God, she comes from such a tragic background. She's actually a badass. But the further you get into her life story and the further you get into her, you're like, oh wait, she's not a badass at all. She's a user and a manipulator and just a broken person, honestly. Yeah, it's really an interesting one today. Disclaimer wise, nothing too vulgar or graphic today. Alma was a sex worker and did, do sex work. So we will be talking about that general content today. But yeah, other than that, nothing too graphic, no bad language or anything like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into Alma Theede and who she was. So Alma Theede, she's known by quite many names, all right, as we'll get into. Her last name changes quite frequently, but Alma Theede was actually born Alma W. Herring, and she was born December 10th, 1895. Yes, this is quite an old case. Alma was born in 1895. Her parents were Ruby and W.M. Herring, and Alma was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. Though I did read some sources that said Alma was actually originally born in Mississippi, and her family had come to Memphis when she was very, very young. I think months old, young. But either way, yeah, Alma grew up and was raised in Memphis. Alma also had an older sister, and her name was Nettie Alba Herring. That was her older sister, like I said. And Alma also had a brother, and his name was Wilton A. Herring. Unclear if he was an older brother or a younger brother. I was not too clear. There are some little minute nitty-gritty details that are missing from Alma's story, probably because the case is so old and whatnot, you know? Now, the Herrings, all right? They were a very poor family. Alma grew up in abject poverty, and money was always scarce. Throughout Alma's childhood, the family struggled to make ends meet. The family struggled so much that at just 16 years old, Alma decided to become a sex worker in order to help the family. Yeah, that's how poor they were. Isn't that sad? Again, I'm all for sex work. It should be legalized, like they're human beings who are working a job just like anyone else. However, it really needs to be that person's decision. No one should feel like they are forced into it, you know? And that was Alma. She thought she had nothing better to offer her family than to do sex work in order to get money. Which, yeah, it was probably, because we're talking about early 1900s here. She's about 16. She's born in 1895, so, early 1900s. Probably was hard for, especially a woman to get a job, I would imagine. And since her family was poor and came from abject poverty, I can't imagine she got much of an education either, you know what I mean? So yeah, Alma, at 16 years old, hit the streets and became a sex worker. Alma patrolled Vance Avenue, and this was a street in the red light district of the town. And in this red light district, it was known for, sex work, obviously, drinking and gambling. It was just sort of like the spot to do these like illicit, illegal activities, Now, around this time that Alma started patrolling the red light district and becoming a sex worker, sex workers were earning about $1 a night, $2 on a good night. Now, adjusted for time and inflation and all that, this translates to roughly $30 a night, about $60 a night on a good night. So not even making that much money. Now, Alma, she quickly became popular in the red light district, especially among Vance Avenue, where she patrolled. And very soon, I think within months of starting sex work, Alma was so popular, she gained herself a nickname, a moniker. She was known as Vance Avenue Alma. Again, she was 16 years old. About a year after she had begun sex work, when she was 17 years old, Alma married her first husband. And this would be the first of many, as we'll get into. So yeah, 17 years old, she meets and marries her first husband. His name is Halprin Cox. There were other sources that said his name was actually Charles Cox. Now, Halprin, or Charles, he worked in the same red light district that Alma did. He actually ran some gambling dens. He ran some crap tables. And as you can imagine, this marriage didn't last. Wasn't the healthiest marriage. Alma claimed Halprin, or Charles, was an alcoholic. And less than a year of marriage, when Alma was 18 years old, she had run back home to her mother, Ruby, who lived in Memphis. She then petitioned Halprin for divorce. So, a year or two passes. Alma's still doing her thing, living with her mom, and in 1913, Alma, who was going by her maiden name, Alma Herring, she married her second husband, a man named William T. Whitworth. But this marriage only lasted a few months. I think it was even shorter than her first marriage. Have no details about William or that marriage, really. Just that they got married and then, months later, they were divorced and Alma was back with her mother, Ruby. But Alma, she was never one to stay single for long, right? She did not stay single for long at all. Quickly, after moving back in with her mother, Ruby, Alma, who was now going by Alma Cox, met and married her third husband. Not exactly how long in between her second marriage and what will be her third marriage, not quite sure, but I know not a lot of time passed at all. So I'm gonna guess less than a year, probably several months. So yeah, she met and married her third husband. He was a 24-year-old man named Roy Calvert, and he was a railroad switchman worker. Apparently, Alma and Roy, they had run off to Little Rock, Arkansas to get married. However, like with her first marriage, this one proved to be pretty rocky. Alma said of her time with Roy, quote, "Roy drank. My, that marriage was a wild one. Not long after getting married, though, Roy wouldn't be much of a problem for Alma because he would wind up dead. So we're going to go to the date, August 30th, 1919. It's a Saturday night, and we're in Little Rock, Arkansas, all right? And this will be the evening that Alma commits her first murder. So when Roy laid down to bed that evening, he asked Alma to awaken him, and to awaken him around like 11:15 that evening, so that he could be up in time for his midnight shift at the railroad. Apparently Roy worked like graveyard shifts and very like odd hours. So yeah, he had a midnight shift to work at the railroad. And when the time came for Alma to awaken her husband, she didn't. Instead, Alma shot Roy in the head while he was sleeping with a .32 caliber automatic pistol. Now, initially, Alma said she knew nothing of the murder, but then she changed her story and claimed that a shooter had stood on their front porch and had fired the shot through the bedroom window. However, after only a few days of interrogation, by Tuesday, September 3rd, Alma changed her story even further. She told Detective Sergeant James Pitcock that she had, in fact, paid a black person $25 to murder her husband. So first she didn't know anything about the murder, then she said there was a shooter, and now she is saying she actually hired that shooter. Now, after 2 arrests of innocent black men, problem that is still occurring to this day, Alma finally broke down and confessed. In between sobs, she told Detective Pitcock that it was actually she alone who had murdered her husband. She had not hired anyone to shoot him. She had done it herself. Can only imagine the treatment those 2 innocent black men were subjugated to. She told Detective Pitcock, quote, "I had been living in torment. I couldn't stand it any longer. I was going crazy. I had to do something. I shot him." Alma claimed that she suffered years of abuse at the hands of Roy. She said that he physically abused her and that he was an abusive, violent alcoholic. She claimed Roy routinely kicked her and punched her and even refused to let her see her own baby. Now, this is one of those parts of the story where there's just not a lot of detail. I couldn't really find a lot of concrete information. Not sure if Alma ever had biological children. I know she ends up adopting children later on, but yeah, she was telling police that when she got with Roy, he made her give up her baby that she had. No idea whose baby it was, if it was Halperin's or Williams or someone else. Not sure, but that she, gave it up for him, and that's what she was referring to when she's telling Detective Pitcock this story. So again, not sure. It's kind of one of the holes in this story that I could not find any concrete information about. Anyway, so she's telling Detective Pitcock that, yeah, Roy kicked her, punched her, wouldn't let her see her own baby. She said, quote, "I gave up my baby to try and get along with him." Clearly trying to paint that she tried really hard to, make this marriage work. But she said that, quote, wasn't good enough for him. She told Detective Pitcock that during Christmas of 1918, so the year prior, the Christmas prior to this happening, she had actually secretly snuck off on a train to go see her baby. But while she was gone, Roy found out, and when she came home at the train station, guess who was there to greet her? Roy. And he was not happy. She said that at the train station, he kicked her in her side, leaving deep bruises, and really roughed her up, tore up all of her clothes. Now, of course, there are going to be plenty to be like, well, if he was so abusive, why wouldn't you just leave the relationship? Well, Alma said that the reason she couldn't leave the relationship was that Roy wouldn't let her. She said she always planned to leave Roy, but he would always say that she would, quote, live with no one else besides him. Alma claimed that Roy gambled away any money that they had. She said that she worked for $5 a week. I don't know what she was doing at this time, if she was still a sex worker or doing something else, not sure. But she said that at her occupation, whatever it was, she was only earning about $5 a week, whereas with Roy's job, he was earning like $5 a day. But even then, they still couldn't save money or do anything because Roy's gambling addiction. He would drink and gamble the money away. Alma also said that Roy continuously cheated on her. He had multiple affairs, and that she had actually gotten a letter from a woman who lived in Memphis. Her name was Bessie, and apparently in this letter, I was unclear if this letter was addressed to Roy or Alma herself, but in this letter, Bessie just really went off on Alma, said how much she hated her, how she wanted her dead, and she wanted Roy all to herself, which I just don't get situations like this. It's like, yo, Roy, okay, if you like have another chick, like just go, just let Alma go. Like, I don't understand. But it's all about power and control with these D-bags, right? So yeah, despite apparently having other women, Roy just wasn't going to let Alma go. Alma confessed that she had actually planned the murder of her husband for quite a while before she finally did it. And she actually only just bought the pistol that she had used to kill him. She had only bought it 2 weeks before the murder. And she also admitted that Roy actually had given her $15 towards the purchase of the weapon that would ultimately kill him. She said she waited 2 weeks because that was just the first opportunity she had to do the job. She said Roy had come home that evening at around 7:30. He had told Alma that he had been out gambling, and he'd actually won $18. He told Alma that $10 of it was for her, but she, for some reason, did not want the money. Not sure why or what her reasonings are, but she declined the money. And this started a fight. She said they argued for about an hour as she sat in her rocking chair crocheting, and she reminded Roy that he needed to be at work at midnight that night, and so he should probably lay down and at least get a few hours of rest, because he was going to have to catch the service train to the rail station where he worked at around 11:30. So she's like, why don't you just like lay down and at least get a couple hours of sleep? And he's like, all right, well, wake me up at about 11:15. Alma said that at around 11:05 p.m., instead of waking her husband up, she walked to the kitchen, retrieved the pistol from where she had hidden it, walked out onto the front porch, and fired one shot through the bedroom window. Alma said that she then threw the gun away and ran next door to the neighbor's house, and acting as if she had just stumbled upon the scene and told them to call the police. The gun was later found in the couple's backyard. She hadn't thrown it very far. Now, Alma also told the police that she believed that Roy was actually planning on killing her, possibly to go run away and be with Bessie. And she said she believed this because she found a bottle of chloroform in the house, which she told police they could still find there, by the way. And it was her belief that Roy had planned to use it on her to kill her. Now, it is said that all throughout her confession to police, Alma is for the most part like cool and collected, maybe a little bit emotional, like showing a little bit of emotion. For the most part, she's very cool and collected. It said the only sign of like nervousness or anxiety from Alma was in her hands. She kept flexing her hands into fists and not like clenching and unclenching them. And after she was done recounting her tale to Detective Pitcock, that is when Alma finally broke down and started just weeping and crying. Alma's mother, Ruby, was brought in to see her daughter. And I said at this time that Alma just like completely collapsed, just really for the first time showed her whole wall just come crumbling down, and she collapsed and sobbed in her mother's arms. It is said that her mother just consoled her daughter and said, quote, perhaps I would have done the same thing had I been in your position. Now, while Alma was awaiting her preliminary hearing, she received numerous calls of support from friends and neighbors, all calling into the police to let them know that Alma was a decent person. She didn't deserve this. They backed up Alma's claims of physical abuse at the hands of Roy. Apparently, it was pretty well known that he was kind of an abusive a-hole. And they just flooded the courthouse and the police with just, messages of support, just begging them for leniency. Because as it stood at the moment, Alma was charged with first-degree premeditated murder. So, pretty serious. Now, I guess normally, persons who were held under first-degree murder charges were not even granted bail at all. Like, it was just sort of like a closed-door issue. Like, no, first-degree murder, you don't even get a bail hearing. It's no bail. But her attorneys, Frank H. Dodge and W.D. Jackson, they did try to fight to at least get her a bond hearing, and they were almost successful, but they were ultimately unable to until Alma had her preliminary hearing. Apparently that had to happen first. And by September 4th, so pretty much the next day after she confessed, Alma's preliminary hearing was actually postponed. And instead, a grand jury was to be convened. And they were to see the case against Alma and see if there was sufficient enough evidence to charge her with first-degree murder. And I believe her attorneys actually like fought for her to have this like grand jury indictment hearing, I think over a preliminary hearing. So as this is going down, as her lawyers are squaring all that away, she's, sitting in jail waiting for her hearing. And she actually viewed Roy's dead body. She actually did request to view it. And it is said that her demeanor was, quote, cool and unconcerned as she viewed Roy's body. And it is even said that she carefully examined the bullet wound that had killed him. Another thing Alma did as she was awaiting her hearing was go on like a little hunger strike, all right? As she was awaiting behind bars, Alma refused to eat or drink anything. And as a result, she eventually ended up fainting from malnutrition. The papers described it, quote, "It is believed that the mental worry and strain under which she has endured since the shooting caused her to faint." Now, according to Ruby, Alma's mother, she said her daughter had always had like an anxiety, like nervousness, like disorder about her. She'd always been kind of high strung and nervous, but like this whole thing with like the trial and everything that had happened was just putting this condition of hers into overdrive. Alma was rushed to the hospital, and there, of course, she was quickly revived and kept under guard, but even so, she still kept up her hunger strike, and she would end up fainting a couple more times. According to the jailer, James H. Hicks, over the course of the week that she would end up in jail, Alma's fainting spells and just general condition worsened each time she fainted. Each time it was getting harder and harder to revive her. It was taking longer and longer for her to like come to full consciousness. He said that when they had first brought her in, she fainted probably like once every 24 hours. But after about 4 or 5 days, those fainting spells had increased to at least twice a day. And whereas in the beginning, it took around like 30 minutes to revive Alma and have her come to like full consciousness, after about 4 or 5 days, it had taken upwards of about like 2 hours for her to come to. Alma eventually did begin to eat some things, though it was mainly just toast with an occasional egg. But hey, at least she's getting protein, right? She was so malnourished that they actually gave her Coca-Cola every 2 to 3 hours for a few days, and then they replaced the Coca-Cola with grape juice. Yeah, and that was all over the course of about a week. Yeah, pretty wild, right? Like that escalated quickly. Now, at her indictment hearing before the grand jury, Alma had numerous neighbors and friends who testified in her defense. They confirmed the abuse that Roy inflicted upon her, and they said that Roy wasn't just a wife beater and abused his wife. He abused women in general. He was just like a general dick, and he had abused women pretty much his whole life. Neighbors spoke of the bickering and fighting that they would see the couple do, and then they would see the multiple bruises that covered Alma's body. Her attorneys argued that Alma suffered immensely at the hands of Roy, not just physically, but like mentally and emotionally as well. They said Alma, who was already a pretty small, petite, frail girl, she was 130 pounds when they got married, but by the time of Roy's murder, Alma only weighed about 90 pounds, and they said that was due to the abuse and stress caused by Roy. As a result, the grand jury refused to indict Alma on first-degree murder charges. And on September 10th, 1919, Alma walked out of court a free woman. Now, not long after being acquitted, Alma moved back to Memphis with her mother Ruby, and it was at this time that Alma took up sex work again. I am not sure if she was doing this while she was married to Roy. I'm not sure, but we do know for sure after being acquitted, she does take up sex work once again. And it was doing sex work and working her old district, working the old Vance Avenue, that Alma met her next husband. Although technically it was a husband that she had before. She met her first husband, Halperin Cox, or Charles Cox, whichever source you're reading. So the two got reacquainted, and in 1924, Alma and Halperin / Charlie got remarried. Now, at some point, I don't know if this was during the first time they were married or during this second time, but at some point, Alma officially adopted 2 of Halpern's children. Not sure names, age, genders, or anything like that. That's all I could find was that at some point, whether it was during their first marriage or the second go around, Alma did officially adopt 2 of Halpern's children. So unfortunately, this second go around at marriage would not last either. While in Arkansas and supposedly en route to St. Louis with supposedly another woman, Halpern got into an auto accident and died. I'm not sure of the exact date of his death. I'm not even sure of the year. And I'm not even sure of how long Alma and him were married the second time around before he died. I'm not sure. I just know that that is what ended that marriage, was him dying. And I don't even know if he really was en route with another woman. That was just what Alma said in a newspaper article, said that he was on his way to St. Louis with another woman. Now, it is said that after Halpern's death, after this, Alma struggled with a gambling addiction. Not too sure of how she picked it up, or maybe the Halpern's death caused it, not sure. But from this point forward, Alma struggled with a gambling addiction. And I am also unaware, by the way, of what happened to Halpern's children, if they stayed with Alma since she officially adopted them. Not sure. Like I said, there are some glaring holes in this story, maybe because of the time period it occurred in, but I tried for hours to find any type of newspaper articles or something, and I couldn't find anything. So not sure if his children are still with her at this point or what. So after Halpern's death, Alma did move back in with her mother Ruby, again, maybe with Halpern's children, not sure. And she started doing sex work again. She went back to Vance Avenue and started doing sex work again. This time, not just to support her family, and it said that to support her family, so that's why I wasn't sure if she did have children that she was supporting as well, not just her mother, but she also needed a way to support her gambling habit now. Now, when Alma went back to the streets to do sex work, she actually ended up working in a brothel or a cat house. Yeah, it's another name for a brothel, isn't that? I liked that name. I was like, cat house? What's that? Yeah, it's just another name for a brothel. So yeah, that's where Alma ended up. She ended up in a brothel this time. Now, it is said over the next few years, Alma worked in this brothel or cat house, but all of her money went to supporting her family and her gambling addiction. She didn't really save anything. And that's why I was unclear if Halpern's children were with her. You know what I mean? Because how could just supporting her mother take all of her money, even with a gambling habit, you know? And they kept describing it as, her supporting her family. So I'm wondering if she did have Halpern's children during this time. But so she's working to support her family, working to feed her gambling habit, and both of these things are just sucking up her money, and she has no savings. But to make matters worse, as the years were going by, Alma was sort of aging, and not in a graceful way. She had lived a pretty hard life starting at a very young age, right? 16 years old. And as the years went by and as she got older, the evidence of her hard life began showing itself in the form of her looks. And poor Alma, she started aging so poorly that the madam of the cat house that she had been working at all these last few years, actually kicked Alma out. She was too ugly to work in the brothel, pretty much. That's pretty much why the madam kicked her out. Alma did find work at another brothel. This was sort of like a lower tiered brothel, you know, it was kind of like a cheaper one. Yeah, just really sad. And it was while working at this cheaper brothel that Alma met her next husband, a man named Michael McClavey. Alma and Michael were married in 1926. Michael was 58 years old, whereas Alma was 31, which I feel like when you start getting into those ages, the age gaps really aren't that big of a deal at that point, you know, she's in her 30s. Now, Michael was a pretty successful guy. He was a very successful road contractor, and he wanted to, quote, rescue Alma for her life. He wanted to be that Prince Charming riding up on the white horse, right? That's what he wanted to be. He wanted to save Alma. Michael was described by everyone as just being a really sweet guy, having a very big heart, and though he was a little bit older, Alma decided to take Michael up on his offer to care for her. She went off and became Mrs. McClavey, and at this point, she stopped doing sex work. Michael even invited Ruby, Alma's mother, to come live with them. Once again, not sure where the children are, if they're still here, but I'm assuming if they were still there, I'm sure Michael would have had them come live with them as well. And yeah, like, honestly, Michael gives Alma a really good life, guys. Like, a really good life. Like, not only does he give her and her mother, and I'm gonna assume her children, a place to stay and supports her and stuff, he even gives her money for her gambling. Yeah, he's a little bit of an enabler, but yeah, he even gives Alma, like, an allowance to go gamble with. And yeah, man, like, this is so great for Alma, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why she couldn't have stayed here and had her happily ever after. So eventually, Alma's gambling got worse and worse, and she was gambling too much money, to the point that Michael had to actually put his foot down and lessen the amount that he was giving Alma for her gambling. It got pretty bad. It's like, that's why you don't enable addictions, but whatever. Now, eventually, Alma's gambling got so bad that Michael just had to completely cut her off. He completely cut her off from her allowance. And this, of course, annoyed Alma. And to top it off, Alma was actually becoming quite bored of the suburban, safe, secure life that Michael was affording her. She was growing bored, guys. Which, I mean, knowing the life she lived, I guess it's not too surprising, I guess? Like, this woman, like, her whole worldview is so skewed. So yeah, she was becoming bored, and she actually contemplating going back to sex work behind Michael's back, just to, you know, get some more excitement and thrill in her life. However, she never did. She may have contemplated it and toyed with the idea, but she never actually went through with it. Instead, Alma suggested to Michael, like, hey, why don't we take in a boarder? We have an extra room. Again, not sure where the children are at this point, if they're around, but yeah, they had some extra room, and she was like, why don't we take in a boarder for, like, some extra cash? I'm sure she was just thinking of cash that she could gamble away. But yeah, Michael was very open to this idea. He was like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's take in a boarder. The boarder that they ended up taking in was 38-year-old Charles E. Miller. Now, Alma had actually met Charles at a gambling hall, and this gambling hall was called Reno's Roadhouse. Charles was a very, like, handsome, charming, charismatic young man. He was an ex-jockey and a former railroad worker. And apparently Alma had, like, a deep respect for railroad workers. I can't say railroad. Railroad. She had a deep, like, respect for railroad workers. Not sure why. Don't know if that was just, like, her thing. Because remember, Roy was a railroad worker. I almost couldn't say it again. But yeah, apparently she really dug that. And Charles was, yeah, he was handsome. He was young. And he was, like, a former railroad worker. And so she was like, yeah, this is it. This is the guy. This is the boarder. And so she offered Charles a room in her and Michael's home, which he gladly accepted. However, we've got the drums coming. So it wasn't long before Charles and Alma, they started making googly eyes at one another, right? They started feeling a little chemistry, you know, started thinking about doing a little something. And it was pretty obvious that the two were kind of vibing on each other, you know? It was pretty obvious. They were not exactly coy with, like, their flirtations or, you know, like their looks that they shared with each other. Like, even Michael, who was, like, nearly blind at this point, because remember, he is older and he is in failing health at this point. So he's, like, nearly blind, and even he could see, like, whoa, what's going on here? He even warned Alma, quote, my dear, you've got to be careful. Yeah, poor Michael. Even still, he just wants to rescue Alma. But of course, guys, Alma and Charles start an affair. Of course they do. They start an affair, and a pretty, like, brazen and open one at that. Like, they didn't really try to hide it. It's one of those affairs that sort of, like, everyone knew about, you know? It is said that Michael just wanted to still rescue Alma. Like, he begged her to love him, to do, like, better. He was in already, like I said earlier, he was in failing health. Not only was he nearly blind, he was also nearly deaf, and he was suffering from cancer. And yeah, it's just so sad. This poor guy, he just wants to save her, and she doesn't want to be saved. She'd rather just be be a scumbag. Yeah, poor Michael. Even after she starts cheating on him, he's still begging her to love him and to just make better choices. Just breaks my heart. Poor Michael. But yeah, Alma didn't care. She didn't care. She doesn't care about anyone but herself, if you can't, like, already glean that from what I've told you thus far. I'm sorry, but when it comes down to it, she's selfish. So Alma and Charles, they continue their affair, continue being brazen about it, not really caring. And yeah, just one of those things that, like, everyone knew. Neighbors knew, people walking down the street knew, people in town knew, everyone knew that they were, boinking each other. Charles would even loudly boast, quote, "If the old fool ever tries to bust up things between me and Alma, he would kill him." Yeah, Charles was loudly boasting to anyone that would listen that, like, he didn't care, he was going to continue this affair, and he would straight up kill Michael if that's what it came down to. He didn't care. And on December 20th, 1927, Charles' threat would come to life, would come to fruition. Yeah, December of 1927. Her and Michael only got married the year before in 1926. I know. She's not a great person. So yeah, December 20th, 1927, at around noon, an ambulance is dispatched to the McClavey residence. Alma was found in the master bedroom, and she was leaning over Michael, who was on the floor. Michael had been shot twice through the heart and once in the hip, and he had actually died instantaneously when the first bullet hit his heart. So Alma was on the floor, cradling his dead body, and she was weeping and shouting, quote, "Who could have shot my poor husband?" She told the police that she had no idea who could have killed Michael, and she said that she had actually been in another room of the house when she heard 3 gunshots ring out. And by the time she got to the master bedroom where Michael was, she said she found Michael lying on the floor and no one else was around. Police, of course, wanted to know, like, where's your boarder at? Where's Charles at? To which, Alma said, "Oh, I have no idea. I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. I don't know." However, police, they knew Alma. They were aware of her history. I wouldn't be surprised if they already were aware of the affair. And they, of course, quickly began an investigation. Neighbors told police that Alma had actually bought Charles a present, and it just so happened to be a gun. They also said that the day before Michael was murdered, Charles was once again going off on one of his, like, many threats against Michael, saying that, like, he would kill him if he dared try getting in between him and Alma, going off. And in the middle of his rant, he turned to Alma and said, quote, "Alma, where's that gun?" To which she replied that it was in the trunk of her car. Charles told her to go get it, which she did, and she gave it to him. Charles then put the gun in his pocket. This was the day before Michael was murdered. These neighbors also told police that, like, look, dude, she knows damn well where Charles is, all right? Like, you need to be watching her because she knows where Charles is. And so police started tracking Alma and pretty much following her, tracing her movements. And finally, following Alma paid off, and she unwittingly led the police straight to Charles. Charles was found living in a tent on some property that was actually owned by Michael. And on January 16th, 1928, on one of Alma's visits to her lover, police arrested both of them, both Charles and Alma. Well, technically, they arrested Charles on charges of murder. Alma was specifically arrested for accessory. Now, after he had been arrested, Charles claimed that he killed Michael in self-defense. Yeah, the guy that was, like, well over 20 years older than Charles and was nearly blind and deaf and fighting cancer. Yeah. Okay. Self-defense. So Charles said that Michael was drunk, was threatening him, and then started physically attacking him, and he started choking him and beating him. And in self-defense, Charles said he got the gun out of his pocket as Michael was supposedly choking and beating him and fired a shot into the wall, sort of like as to sort of like spook Michael or whatever. But Michael, he didn't stop choking Charles, guys. He didn't stop. And so Charles said that's when he got the gun and fired and shot Michael 3 times. Now, Charles ended up pleading not guilty by self-defense. And though his lawyers tried to get Charles' confession to the police thrown out, they were unsuccessful, and his confession was admissible in his trial. Now, at his trial, he was supposed to take the stand in his own defense, but he never did. But Alma sure did. She certainly took the stand against Charles in his trial. Now, Alma, she was in hot water herself. She was accused of harboring Charles and harboring him in her home for days after the murder as police were looking for him. And she was also accused for covering up his part in the murder. So she had some other charges that she was facing on her own. At her own trial, Alma pleaded not guilty and claimed that she had absolutely no part or knowledge in the murder, had no idea what had happened, and that she was completely innocent. She did take the stand in her own defense at her trial, and while she was on the stand, Alma did talk about her past encounters with the law. She denied Charles was her lover. Yeah, she was just straight up denying the affair now. She said she was nothing more than a landlady to Charles, okay? They were not lovers. She said that she had only taken Charles in because she had a gambling habit, and so, you know, it was a way to make some extra cash. Now, though Alma maintained her innocence on cross-examination, apparently the prosecutor just, poked numerous holes in her entire story. I'm sure proving her and Charles were in fact having an affair was quite easy. The prosecutor accused Alma of harboring Charles and helping him escape the house even as her husband lay dead on the floor bleeding. The prosecutor also pointed to the fact that Michael was older, was in poor failing health, and had no gun or weapon. And when Alma tried to say that her love for Michael was unfaltering, and it was unfaltering because she had in fact borne him a child, the prosecutor apparently really got under Alma's skin when he pointed out, well, yeah, but you didn't bear that child, you adopted that child. And apparently that really pissed Alma off. Now, I am not aware, again, this is one of the holes. I don't know if her and Michael did adopt a child, and if so, I don't know, son, daughter, name, not sure. Alma bristled at the prosecutor and said that Michael had, quote, made a lady out of her. And yeah, she just kind of went on a rant, just proclaiming her innocence, going off on how she was completely innocent and didn't do anything. In fact, her protests were so loud, they actually had to close the windows and the doors to the courtroom because, she was interrupting, other court proceedings and other stuff going on outside the courtroom. So that's how loudly she was proclaiming her innocence. She said, quote, he found me in a house of shame. He knew what I was, but he loved me. Look at me good. Can't you see I've paid? I'm only 29. I look 50. I'm no longer pretty. The police are down on me. That's why I'm here. I know I used to be bad, but I've been good ever since the day Mike took me out of that house. And I know she said on the stand that she was 29. I think she kind of fibbed about her age for a few years because she would be in her early 30s during this trial because she was born in 1895. So yeah, I think she was fudging her age by a couple years. But despite loudly proclaiming her innocence, the gun that she had bought for Charles and the exchange that they had had the day before Michael was murdered just was too much evidence against the pair. And on March 14th, 1928, they were each found guilty. It took the jury less than an hour of deliberation. Charles was found guilty of second-degree murder, and Alma was found guilty of accessory to murder before the fact. Charles, who was 42 years old, was sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Alma, who was about 32 years old, was sentenced to 10 years. Both of them were to serve at the state penitentiary in Nashville, Tennessee. So yeah, I don't know if they had I guess they had men and women both serving at that prison. I'm gonna assume they probably kept them housed separately, I'm assuming. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Now, it is said that Alma was extremely bitter towards Charles after this, all right? Extremely angry and bitter. She felt that he should have spoken out more in her defense and had done more to proclaim her innocence. Now, the state had decided not to pursue the death penalty against Charles. I don't think they could have gotten the death penalty against Alma for what she was charged with. But yeah, they instead opted for just lengthy prison sentences, which 15 years and 10 years doesn't seem that long to me, but maybe because of the time period, average life expectancy around that time. So maybe when you take those factors into consideration, it is kind of a lengthy prison sentence. Now, both Charles and Alma, they did attempt to, of course, appeal their decision and get a new trial. And they tried to get a new trial based on the grounds that the jury, on the night before the trial was to begin, was dismissed by the judge. They were allowed to, go home. But their appeals were denied because the judge pointed out, well, yeah, but both the prosecution and the defense agreed to disband the jury. So, yeah, you've got no grounds. And so they got no appeal. Now, it is while serving her prison sentence that Alma finds her next husband. Yep, she finds another one, guys, while serving her prison sentence. So yeah, while in prison serving her sentence, she met William Bill Theede, whom she had met in a prison workroom. Yeah, so I don't know, like, I'm assuming, of course, they didn't house the males and females together, but yeah, I thought that was trippy. I don't know how much I'm digging these new falsies. I don't know how much I like them. So yeah, they're in a prison workroom, and that's how Bill meets Alma. So yeah, they're both serving at the same penitentiary. Bill was serving time for the murder of a 15-year-old boy that had occurred during a grocery store holdup that he was doing, and this had occurred in 1921. He informed Alma that he had been sentenced to 21 years. However, with good behavior that he had racked up, he was going to be getting out of prison around the same time as she was. And he told her, quote, "I'll meet you on the outside." Aw, romantic. Alma ended up serving 4.5 years of her sentence, and then she was paroled into the care of a Reverend Ben Cox, who was a Baptist minister. Yeah, thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, you can just be like remanded in like your parole or whatever and released into the custody of like someone of the clergy or something. That was trippy. Like, I don't know how she knew this reverend, if at all. I was a little unclear about that. Bill was paroled only a few months later, and with the state's permission, Bill and Alma got married in 1933 in Hernado, Mississippi. Or is it Hernado? Is it Hernado or Hernado? Do you know? Let me know. I forgot to check. Now, after the marriage, Alma managed to get a 3-room shanty that rested on 7 acres of land. And this was on the outskirts of Memphis in Grant's Corners. Apparently, Alma had gotten the down payment for this property due to her mother, Ruby. Ruby, ever the saver and ever always thinking of her daughter, had started like saving money for quite like some time. And I guess it was for her daughter. So yeah, Alma had money for a down payment. So yeah, Alma should be thanking her mother, because if it wasn't for her, she wouldn't have any land. So yeah, Alma gets a little 3-room shanty. Bill and Ruby both move in with Alma, and the 3 attempt to raise chicken and pigs for a living. Yeah, Vance Avenue Alma was now trying to become a farmer. For the next 3 years, Alma lived a pretty, low-key existence, living life on the DL. The police only interacted with Alma once during this 3-year time period, and it was when she was arrested for petty theft. She, I guess, feared going back to prison for this parole violation, and so she, talked super fast. And then Governor Henry Horton gave Alma a full pardon. So not exactly sure what she was have stolen or what exactly she said that made the governor pardon her. I don't know, but she got off. But Alma's troubles weren't over. Alma, who was now much older, much grayer, was having a difficult time in her marriage to Bill. In 1936, he actually petitioned for divorce, and he claimed Alma had threatened to kill him. And Bill was actually granted a restraining order from his wife. He said even if Alma hadn't threatened to kill him, he would still want to divorce her. He said, quote, "Living with Alma and her mother is like living in a pigsty. They keep 4 parrots, 2 dogs, and a cat. They even let chickens and pigs run through the house." Ugh, that sounds really gross, by the way. Now, here's another little weird thing. All right, remember I told you there's little holes in the story, probably because of how old it is. So one of these holes is actually the time period that Alma and Bill are together. So I read multiple newspaper articles that said Bill and Alma actually got married in 1938 in Lincoln County, Tennessee, and that the divorce didn't happen until April of 1946, while other newspaper articles followed the timeline that I just set out for you. So yeah, not sure which is right, because that's a pretty significant difference in between newspaper articles, and I found just as many who laid out the timeline I laid out for you, and just as many that said it was this, married in 1938, divorced in 46. So not sure. But either way, Bill's divorce petition was granted. However, get this. So, since divorce petitions are of public record, and back in this day, this kind of stuff was in newspapers, I guess because they had to fill the pages with something. And so, the news of Alma and Bill's divorce was put in the paper, as were their pictures. And a one Mrs. George Calhoun, no idea if that's how you say the name, that we're just going to go with it, she saw Bill and Alma's pictures in the newspaper, and she actually identified them as the couple who had actually stolen stolen some linen and silver from her home not too long before. I don't know if we're talking about like months before or years before, but yeah, she identified Alma and Bill as being ones who ripped off some clothes and some silver from her. And as a result, both Bill and Alma were sent to the Shelby County Penal Penal Farm, where they served relatively short sentences. And when Bill got out, he just like disappeared, so not sure what happened to him after he got out. Alma, when she got out, she went back to her shanty where Ruby, her mother, was and her pets. And the next several years saw Alma and her mother living in abject poverty and working really hard, scraping by just to make ends meet. Alma only got in trouble once with the law during this time period, and that was when she stole a cow. She told the court that the cow was for, quote, the babies. And the court, not bothering to follow up on that specific comment, sentenced Alma to 90 days in the workhouse. I read other articles that said it was 60 days. However, even though the judge in Alma's case wasn't too concerned with her for the babies comment, a Shelby County probation officer, she did. This probation officer's name was Alice Saxby, and as Alma was serving her 90 days, or 60, as Alma is serving her time in the workhouse, Alice made the trek out to Alma's shanty, and there she discovered 3 children were living with Alma and her mother, including a 22-month-old infant. Apparently, this infant had been born at St. Joseph's Hospital, which was located in Memphis, and the infant had been born to a Forest City, Arkansas girl, and this girl actually gave the baby away because it was illegitimate, and somehow Alma got the infant. We don't know how or when, like if this girl just saw Alma in the hall and was like, yo, you want a baby? We don't know. I don't even know who those other 2 children were. Were they Halperins? Was it the baby that she had with Michael? I don't know. All we know is that all 3 of the children, including the infant, were taken from the home, and Alma never saw them again. That's all we know. In 1946, not long after getting out of the workhouse, Alma married her 5th husband, a man named Ed Gill. Ed was a 62-year-old ripsaw, and he moved into the shanty with Alma and Ruby. And 3 years later, 3 years after marrying Ed, in the early morning hours of January 2nd, 1949, a sailor named William E. Rhodes, he was in Memphis on shore duty, and he found himself in these early morning hours, kind of a little buzzed, walking down the street that Alma's shanty sat on. So he walked down the street, past her shanty, didn't think, anything of it, and about a mile past Alma's shanty, William made a horrifying discovery. There was a man laying in the middle of the road. One touch told William that the man was dead, and because he was in the middle of the road, William thought like, oh, he must have been a victim of a hit and run. But once the police were called and the sheriff's office was dispatched, they quickly ruled out that theory. And why did they rule out a hit and run? Well, because they saw what had killed the man. It was a gunshot to the head. It was a gunshot made with a .38 caliber gun. It was a .38 caliber bullet. And a deputy sheriff actually identified the man on the road. It was Ed Gill. He exclaimed, quote, "That's Ed Gill, Vance Avenue Alma's husband. Alma's gone and shot herself another husband." Yeah. And of course, wasn't long before police were knocking on Alma's door, and she feigned ignorance and even knowing that her husband was dead. She reportedly said, quote, "Dead?" She showed no surprise and then just kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, quote, "He's been terrible drunk for weeks. How'd he die?" And that's when the sheriff asked, like, "Hey, Alma, do you have a .38 caliber gun in your possession by chance?" And what do you know? She did. But, quote, "I didn't shoot Ed. Honest. I didn't." And Ruby, who is now 76 years old and ever one to defend her daughter, said, quote, "The gal is telling the truth. Ed came home last night awful drunk. Then he went out again. But Alma slept right here in bed." Now, after retrieving her pistol for the police, which by the way she had hidden along with hidden cartridges in her yard that they found, Alma was arrested and carted off to jail once again, and once again for murder. Ballistics later determined that the bullet that had killed Ed did in fact come from Alma's gun. Now, when confronted with this information, Alma changed her story. What a shock, right? So now she's weaving a new tale. She said that on that Saturday night, which was New Year's Day, her and Ed had actually visited friends, and then she drove them home in the truck. I actually read one article that said Ed and Alma had actually gone to a friend's house to settle an argument. Like, oh God, isn't that the worst when couples put you in the middle of their fights? Don't do that. Don't do that, all right? Alma claimed that Ed had been drinking all day, and she said that the couple had argued about Ed wanting to leave her, which I guess was the source of many arguments between them. She told police that Ed told her to stop the truck, which she did. He reached in the glove compartment and pulled out the pistol, which was wrapped up in like some sort of cloth. She said at that point, both of them got out of the truck, her on the right side and him on the left, which was weird because she said she was driving, which means that she would have gotten out on the left side and Ed on the right. But whatever. They got out of the truck, argued some more, and then started fighting for possession of the pistol. Alma said that as her and Ed struggled, Ed slipped, the pistol went off, and then Ed slumped to the ground. Alma said that due to the terror of the police and being in, quote, big trouble, she drove away, leaving Ed dying in the street. However, after a 4-day investigation, forensics didn't quite add up to Alma's version of events. First of all, the bullet was in the back of Ed's head, and he had no gunpowder burns around the wound or anywhere near the wound, which would have indicated like a close-up struggle like Alma claimed that they were. So none of that. Neighbors and friends also told the police that the left side door in the couple's truck was actually jammed, and you couldn't get out of the left side of the door for many months. You had to exit out the right side. Furthermore, though Alma and Ruby swear up and down that Ed was a heavy drinker and an alcoholic, and had actually drunk the whole week leading up to his death, his employer at the sawmill and other co-workers, who he had worked with for like 10 years, he'd been at that sawmill for like 10 years, so his employer and co-workers, they said they had never known Ed to like drink steadily or like have a drinking problem. He didn't really do it all that much. And police were also puzzled how Alma, who was 5'2", 100 pounds soaking wet, could even attempt to struggle or fight with her husband, Ed, who was 6'1" and over 200 pounds. Like a pretty hefty guy. They're like, how could you even like entertain in like a fight or a struggle with this guy? Also, Ed's hand was also in his overcoat when his body was found, and his other arm was like lying by his side, which I guess were like the way he lay down, it didn't add up to a struggle according to police. Like this isn't how someone who accidentally got shot in the middle of an intense struggle for a weapon would have like laid down. It just doesn't add up. Now, since this was not Alma's first brush with the law, and she had sort of gained a sort of infamy, her preliminary hearing was of course swarmed with press, reporters, photographers, and Alma actually had grown a distaste for the press. You know, they'd come to all of the times that she was in trouble with the law. Like she had articles written about her. Hello, that's how I got the bulk of information for this case. So yeah, she'd grown a certain distaste for the press. Now, before the judge came in, and without anyone prompting her, no one spoke to her, no one was talking to her, she turned around and addressed a couple of reporters who were like sitting like a pew or two like behind her, and she let them know that she wasn't afraid of a trial, okay? She said, quote, "I am no more afraid of this trial than I am of my God. Ed didn't marry me blindfolded. I laid my cards on the table. No woman in Memphis has tried to be more law-abiding than me. The trouble is, when you try to be upstanding, other women won't let you. And, of course, the police always hound you." Yeah, she said like this little rant, like completely unprompted to the press, which of course they took it down. Alma was ultimately indicted once again on murder. And Alma was pretty confident she was going to get off. But in March of 1949, she must have decided trial was too risky, because before her trial could begin, she pleaded out to a plea deal. And she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The state's attorney, a man named John Heskell, he was touched by Alma and Ruby's poverty, and just kind of touched with these like sad old women, you know? And he asked for a sentence for no more than 10 years for Alma, with parole eligibility in 7 years. Now, apparently in Shelby County, up to this point in time in history, no white woman had ever served more than 10 years for murder by a jury. Alma was sent to the state penitentiary in Nashville. Meanwhile, as Alma was serving her sentence, Ruby lost the property. Also, as she was serving her time, Alma actually sent Christmas cards to the prosecutor and judge in her case. It said, quote, "Wishing you and yours all of God's richest blessings for the season and many, many more to come." Yeah, weird. Alma was ultimately paroled in 1955, and not long after getting out, you guessed it, she met and married her 6th husband, a man named William Massey, and this was in 1960. Now, there's not much known about like William or like their time together. We just know that William and Alma's marriage was very brief, and the couple quickly divorced. I don't know if we're talking months or years here, not sure. Now, after this, Alma spent her days running a boarding house in Memphis. So that's what she did. And in her later years, she ended up constantly losing track of her pets. So I came across multiple news articles from like the 60s and 70s of Alma putting out like little ads in the lost and found section of like pets that she had lost track of. It was really funny. She had a lot of pets. It included 3 dogs named Toy Baby, Woo Woo, and Panku, who, yes, she would constantly lose. And she also had 2 quails named Betty and Bob. And yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of newspaper articles from like the 50s and 60s of Alma just constantly losing her pets, which she also lost a parrot at one point, along with like dogs and a cat. Like, yeah, this chick could not keep track of her animals, apparently. In April of 1963, Alma's older sister Nettie, she finally died at the age of 73, and she left 68-year-old Alma her entire estate. And Alma was actually going by Alma Massey at this time. Nettie's estate was valued at $5,000, which was all left to Alma, but Nettie did leave a whole dollar to their brother, Wilton, who, in Nettie's own words, had nothing to do with me in my lifetime, and I do not even want him present at my funeral. Yeah, there's some bad blood there, apparently. Now, due to Alma's past larceny charge from 1946, apparently this rendered Alma infamous, which meant she lost certain citizenship rights. And this meant that she could not serve as, like, say, an elected official, an executor, an administrator, or even a guardian. She lost those rights. And as a result, though Alma was left executor of Nettie's will and estate, a judge made her step down from that role. In October of 1967, Alma added another animal to her collection. It was a robin that she named Tweety. So apparently some 12-year-old boy had, like, found this robin with a broken wing and had nursed it back to health, and him and his mother had put out an ad in the paper like, hey, we're looking for someone to take this bird, and they chose Alma. Now, at the time Alma added Tweety to her collection, apparently she already had 14 other birds, and she was described as being, quote, semi-invalid. And finally, at the age of 75 years old, Alma Theede passed away. She died of natural causes on October 15th, 1970 in Baptist Hospital, and this was after being moved there from her Millington nursing home. Her obituary said that the only family that she left behind were 2 children, and these were 2 of the children she adopted. One named Charles J. Cox, and another named Mildred Leifler. So yeah, I don't know if those were maybe Halpern's 2 children that she adopted. I don't know. And where's this, like, infant that she had with Michael? I don't know. That's all her obituary said, was that she left behind 2 children whom she had adopted. Alma was buried in Elmwood Cemetery next to Charles Cox, her first husband, and she was buried under the name Alma Theede for some reason. Isn't that weird? Yeah, that was the name that she was buried under. I don't know why you wouldn't just bury her under her maiden name, but I know she'd been married like, so many times, maybe people weren't aware. But yeah, guys, that was the tale of Vance Avenue Alma. Alma Theede, man, like, what just a sad, pathetic life, man. Like, first it starts out really sad, right? That, her family was so poor that she felt the only way that she could get the money was to do sex work at 16 years old, right? And so you feel sorry for her. And then she gets into her marriage with Roy, and people confirm the abuse, and I can certainly see how you could defend her. I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard for me to defend her because I know what she did later. Like, poor Michael, who just wanted to rescue her, And Ed, it seemed like Ed was, like, fine. I couldn't find anything about people accusing him of being an abusive alcoholic or anything like that. Like, remember, his employer and coworkers said that he barely even drank, So I don't know. It's just so sad, and it's kind of hard for me to think she was justified in shooting Roy. I don't know. Because at the same time, she did say that he wouldn't let her leave. Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. I think Alma was a very sad, broken person. She lived a very sad existence. She could have just been happy with Michael, but she grew bored. She grew bored, guys. Think of how skewed your perception of what is, like, normal is when you've led a life like Alma, I don't know why she had to sabotage herself. I don't know why she couldn't just be happy with Michael. And yeah, she ended up murdering 3 of her husbands. One, maybe not directly. Maybe she didn't directly murder Michael, but she certainly encouraged it and bought the weapon. You know what I mean? So I don't know. She was just as guilty. I'm super curious to know, what do you guys think of Alma? Like, do you think she was justified in killing Roy? Does knowing what she did to Michael and Ed later kind of take away from any justifiable actions that she took against Roy. Super curious to know what you guys think. Like, Alma, that was just a fascinating, just sad, pathetic case. I was just like, what is this woman? Like, it's just bizarre, man. She's just kind of an enigma a little bit. I don't know. I found it super interesting. That's why I wanted to talk about it with you guys. And next week, all right, we're going to kick off the month of August with my big two-parter. It's a whopper, dude. And if you were angry at the Candy Montgomery case, whoo boy, you've got nothing on this next case I'm going to talk about, guys. It is infuriating. I'm also excited because it is the first case I'm going to cover that you guys recommended to me. This was like one of the first cases that someone recommended to me. And next month, I've actually got a couple of cases that you guys have recommended to me. Yes, I'm finally getting into them. Very, very anxious to talk about these cases with you guys because you recommended them. All right, y'all. I will go ahead and leave off the month of July with this case. I will see you back next week for our part 1 of part 2. It's a long one, so just prepare, all right? Just prepare. Alrighty, guys, I hope you take care. Stay safe out there. I will see you next week. Remember, don't be a dick, all right? Don't be a D-bag. We really, really don't need that right now. We've got enough BS going on. Just be a decent person, man, all right? Just be cool. Alrighty, I will see you guys next month. Bye-bye.